What is source?
Source is God. But it's not the God that you think of in terms of it's the separate entity that's controlling life like chess. It's everything that is source energy. It's just expressing itself differently. So this source energy behind me is expressing itself as a book. The source energy that is me is expressing itself in this body, you see. And it is all there is. There's nothing outside this. Because everything that is this extension of source energy, we are in this very strange dimension where we have free will, but we're also sort of living out something that's fated. I'll explain. To begin with, we are in a space of oneness. This is before this life, this is in the very beginning. We're in this immense space of non-separation. That source, if you will, energy, had its first desire, its first thought, you could say, and that was to know itself. You have to know yourself from the concept of separateness. It's the same as you can't stand in black and know black. You have to stand in white to know black, and vice versa. So we are in these physical bodies, these separate physical bodies, which is as separate as it gets, so that we can gain awareness of what oneness is. So, because of this, basically, Source is knowing itself through absolutely every thought that's ever been thought. This is how it knows what it is. So, we are Source. So in our lives, we are living out sort of, we're doomed to think. We'll put it this way. We're doomed to think and we're doomed to desire. So that is a form of having no free will. That's sort of being played, but we're being played by our very selves because we are Source. So it's not like somebody else is in control of us. We are in control of us. We've just lost touch with our higher selves. Mm-hmm. But we have free will of choice, of thought in this life.
Mm-hmm. So one can perhaps tap into their true self, yes, or higher self, and then kind of regain complete control.
Yes. And then you don't feel like it. You feel like it's you making all the decisions.
Yeah. So do people who, I guess, sort of pride themselves on being very logical or scientific, and they hear things like this, or they analyze concepts like the zodiac, and they think it's just a bunch of random things that we as humans just invent, and then we find meanings in it,
yes,
like finding shapes in the cloud.
I would say that that's what science does.
What do you mean?
All science is looking around and trying to draw a line from one thing to the other. It is more narrow-minded than even the things that they think are of limited scope. It deals with the three-dimensional reality, which is not the only reality there is. Mm-hmm. Basically, you get to wait and play catch-up. If we were basing everything on science, the world would be flat. Because science evolves. It continually evolves. So we only are as advanced as our measuring instruments, which is pretty sad at this point. Mm-hmm. And you know, these tapes will exist far past I'm talking, you know, and we will have the ability to catch up with what many esoterics are saying. Mm-hmm. And at that point we'll say, oh, that person who we all thought was crazy, just like the first person that said the world was round, suddenly isn't anymore.
So you feel that science will one day sort of harmonize with things at this point that traditional science would look at as almost pseudoscience?
Our science will become multidimensional. It's just very slow to catch up.
What is your overall view of where humanity is headed?
Fantastic. This is, of course, what everybody's very interested in because of this recent onslaught of information about 2012. We have a lot of people focused towards apocalypse right now, and people like me are so excited. I look around at everybody that's in my experience and say, oh, this is fantastic. We all came down for this exact moment. This is why so many of the personalities are very intense today. It's because we dove into a very, very catalytic time. We looked at this and knew that it would be very rapid change. And we are evolving as a species very fast. We're at the point of the 100th monkey, I like to say. So in science, essentially, you'll watch X amount of years where a species basically, at least physically, stays the same. And then suddenly, it shifts. We're at that point as a human race. But this shift is going to be towards spirituality. So it's very exciting to people like me.
Why now? Why is it happening now?
Because it's a collective desire. Things happen on a grand scale when... So you're individually, basically, you're evolving based on your desires. So you desire something, and out of that desire, essentially, is born the means to achieve that desire. And when you finally get there, all of physical life will change in order to match that changed frequency. Because a desire, a new thought, is a frequency, which the physical must follow. So this is the reason for species evolution. If collectively a species is wanting things that can't be satisfied through their current physical structure or something like this, or current environment, either the species disappears or the species changes. So we are at a point where the human race has desired enough that we are now in the middle of that shift. We will eventually, I think, not have physical bodies as a human race. That's way down the line, but this is basically the turning point.
It seems like the idea about 2012, I mean, there's kind of a connection with like the Mayan calendar and things like this,
Yes.
as if this particular period in our history has been known about for some period. Is there any validity to that, or
Yes.
did we just create our own self-fulfilling prophecy?
Well, it's both. That's why you know things. It's because you're basically creating it. The reason that people are so good at being prophetic is they're just reading the vibration that is. We haven't deviated so much to not be a match to what is. This is why if you're going to go visit a future reading, the person who reads what your future is going to be, it's only a future that's a match to you vibrationally now. When I sit with a person, I see 3 life paths for them at all times. Humans who are practicing the same thought patterns don't tend to change enough in their lives to make those 3 paths change often. So you can predict, just based on that, what a person's outcome is going to be. But it's just like gambling. If a person was going to, change their vibration enough to attract a circumstance like a car wreck into their life one day, and that car wreck changed the way they view the entire universe, they could change their vibration enough to change all 3 paths in their life. So there is absolutely no such thing as a future that's decided for you. So what they were doing basically years ago was reading the way that the vibration was and understanding what is a match to that, and that is the entire evolution of the human species at the certain point. So yes, many people predicted this.
And do you think that there is more, I guess, truth, as it were, available now than there has been in previous?
Yes, because we're starting to awaken. The human race at large is starting to awaken to the divinity within. And that opens you up to an entire... It puts you in an objective realm, basically, where you're able to view the fact that you create everything that is. Once you understand that, life as it is changes. Our desires are different. We're no longer sitting down here on this planet worried about who's going to get what country. Our entire priority shifts, so the human race shifts.
Are there other, I guess you could say, are there other human beings that have gone through this same process in the history of the universe? Are we the first and only? If
it had been done already on a mass scale, then we wouldn't be doing it. It would have already been done.
I mean like another group of human beings, and somewhere out in the universe.
Oh, yes.
They've gone through this same process.
A similar process. I can start talking.
Huh?
I can start talking then.
Yeah. So how long have you been an alcoholic? Oh, just kidding.
So I've coined the term spiritual catalyst, which is basically someone that inspires change on the level of spirit. I was born in Santa Fe, New Mexico in 1984, and my parents always tell this joke that when they first moved there, they were sitting down at a coffee table and they opened up a newspaper, and in the newspaper there was an ad that said, "Get your dogs or a balance to reggae music." And my parents were completely not into this kind of thing at all. They were both Forest Service Rangers, and so they started hysterically laughing and sent this little cutout from the newspaper to my grandparents. Like, look where we're living now. This place is so outside on the map. They decided to move to Logan, Utah. I should say into a canyon that's in between Logan, Utah and Bear Lake, because they took a little job in a guard station cabin which had no electricity and no indoor plumbing, which I really liked that place, but they didn't really understand the climate. When you're young, like I was, I really didn't know that anybody would have the kind of problems with what I was doing that they ended up having. Because to me it was just normal. I didn't know yet, oh, I shouldn't be saying these kind of things in public. You know, kids have zero filters, and I was no exception. So I would scare the crap out of my teachers. The majority of my parents' life, actually, for the first stint there in public school, was coming in and constantly trying to pacify my teachers who were going, there's something wrong with this kid. We don't know what's going on with this kid. She's scaring the crap out of the other kids, you know. So it started getting out in the community. And the thing is, there's a scientific community which basically does not believe in the kind of stuff that I'm doing, a vast majority of them. And then there's the religious community that does believe in the stuff that I'm doing, but they've all got their spin on what it is that's causing it. So in the LDS religion, they believe that priesthood comes down from Joseph Smith directly to men. So, and that, basically, that priesthood is what makes it so that a person can have extrasensory abilities, can receive divine messages from God, and can do spontaneous healing, which is the kind of stuff that I was doing. So the fact that a female was exhibiting this, to many of them, meant that it was not a gift from God given through Joseph Smith, it was a gift of the devil. And so I was, for the mainstream Mormons basically in town, I was not allowed to go in their houses. I was not allowed to play with their kids. My parents would receive letters saying that I was a sign of the second coming. It was immediate ostracization before I could even understand what was going on with me. And we were completely exiled from the community. But there's also a cult up there. There's many, actually, up in Logan. As you can imagine, very extreme fundamental religious beliefs tend to breed a lot of deviance. So there's a cult up there that goes by the name of the Blood Covenant. They believe in blood atonement. They believe essentially that there are some sins which Jesus died for that can't be paid for by that death. And so sins must be paid for by the blood of man. You can imagine that this kind of a belief opens the door for people who already exhibit sociopathic behavior. They can kind of use this belief to do whatever, justify whatever it is that they're doing. So when you grow up in this cult, there's punishments, physical punishments, a lot like the Catholic penitentes, for everything. If you steal a piece of gum from your parents, they slit you on your wrist or on your hand and they'll bleed you over a sink for 15 minutes. Or they lock you in the basement. Or you get whipped. It's just a list. So this cult, unlike the Mormons who sort of pushed my family and me as far away as possible, they believe that it's
not
their...
the fundamentalists, just the...
No, just the Mormons. Unlike them, the fundamentalists, the Blood Covenant, believes that it is their direct job to rid the earth of evil. So their message from them isn't, oh, we just need to not go near this person. It's we need to directly make it so that they are no longer allowed to do the things that they're doing. Try to right their wrongs. My parents had a mutual friend who they knew a long time before I was born, and they had no idea was into this stuff. He is an incredibly charismatic person and a sociopath. He has dissociative identity disorder, meaning that he flips between different identities. And one of his identities belonged to this group. He had another identity that belonged to a satanic group. So you can imagine that was really terrible growing up. But he basically infiltrated my family and came into the situation as a mentor. So that happened when I was 6 years old. And he began systematically taking me more and more and more and more. As you can imagine, there's only so much that you can separate what's going on with you in terms of this kind of abuse and torture with your day-to-day life. So I started getting to the point where I really couldn't balance the two. And so to my parents, I was just starting to look mentally ill. I was starting to look like I couldn't cope like other kids and just way upset all the time. And so they didn't know what to do with me. My parents were very, very trusting people and very optimistic to a scary degree. So it never crossed their mind that something like this could possibly be going on. So when I came back home and was so messed up, they yet again said, I don't have an answer for this. Please bring me somebody that has an answer to this. And he came in and said, I have an answer. So while he was creating the very problem, he was also saying that he was helping it. My elementary school is on a college campus, so they can't restrict anybody that's on the grounds, which is very abnormal for an elementary school. So during school hours, there would be college students weaving in and out, and when I went to school, this sort of issue of children being abused was not really in the public eye yet, and so I really don't think it occurred to any of them that this kind of stuff could be going on. And getting out of school back then was as easy as just bringing a note and giving it to the secretary at the school. You know, written by an adult and signed saying that Teal has to come out at this point. So I would take those notes from him and put them in my lunchbox for school, and then I would go and give them to the principal's office and leave. And he also was taking me out of my bed at night, until he eventually trained me when to wake up. It's still a problem to this day, because he was very into mental programming, obsessed with the Nazi stuff that was happening basically in the concentration camps. And so I was programmed to wake up at 3:22 a.m., walk to the end of my driveway and get in the car with him, at which point we would go do ceremonies or he would prostitute me, things like that.
And you say to this day you still have that lingering?
I still have that problem. I wake up at 3:22. Yeah.
Do you ever, in that mode, think that he's going to be there?
I used to, but not anymore. It used to be a big problem. It took many years and a lot of therapy for me to be in an okay space after everything that happened. So I went through this phase, my athletic phase, where I tried to get as far out of extrasensory stuff, which is very hard for me, and into my body as I could. I wanted nothing to do with the stuff that I was doing my entire life, because it was the entire reason for everything that happened to me. I was sort of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. A large majority of my way of healing was to heal mentally. So I didn't get on pills, psychiatric pills. What I did is meditation. A lot of inside work that they do with, that psychologists do with visualizations and things like this. And it worked so well, basically, that it kind of blew my mind. So I started sort of experimenting with asking questions and listening to what it was that I was receiving and really trying to practice what it was that I was able to understand. These universal truths, essentially, that I came into this life with, that stayed intact even despite the abuse. I started living by them. And it completely transformed my life, everything about it. I woke up one morning and just had this urge to start writing down everything that I knew as to how a person can heal themselves, and these old universal truths, basically, the truths of the bigger questions, things like why are we here. So I just started writing, and it took me 3 months to write that book, which is an incredibly fast time, and it just flowed. It was just basically coming through me. I didn't even feel like I was really necessarily the one writing it. I was just sort of putting words down.